hottest hits, the hottest stars. And here's a star who says he just doesn't live up to the wild rock star image. He's 22-year-old Englishman Rick Astley, and he says, "I'm sorry, but I'm just not the type to throw TVs out of windows and consume 15 pints of beer a night. I'm just too sensible for that." At number 2, here's thoroughly sensible Rick Astley with his first Top 40 hit, "Never Gonna Give You Up."
American Top 40.
This is American Top 40 in Hollywood. I'm Kasem.
We're no strangers to love. You know the rules, and so do I.
Now we're up to a recent number 1 smash by a young man who asked not what he could do for his country, but what his country could do for him. The story begins back in 1985. Rick Astley was a freckled-faced 19-year-old living in a small town right outside of Manchester called Newton-le-Willows. He wrote songs, did a little singing with local bands, and dreamed of becoming a professional singer. But he had a big problem. The problem was money. You see, to support himself, Rick had to work full-time at his dad's nursery, and he worked long, hard hours, too, driving the truck, delivering the plants. There just wasn't enough time for music. But then Rick figured out a way to get around his workaday problem. You see, in Britain, there's a government program called the British Enterprise Allowance Scheme, and it's designed to help people start their own businesses. Well, Rick filled out the forms. What business did he want to start? Pop singer. Well, the British government accepted Rick's unorthodox application, but they weren't going to just hand over the money. Rick had to put up £2,000 himself, about $3,700, and then they would match it. So he borrowed the money from his dad, and over the course of the next year, they paid him $3,700, giving him about $75 a week to help him get his business started. Now, even though that wasn't a lot of money, it was enough to support Rick for a while so he could concentrate on music. He wrote and he wrote, composing dozens of songs. Then he went to a local studio and put together a pretty impressive demo tape. Well, that demo tape was sent to the big London producing team of Mike Stock, Matt Aitken, and Paul Waterman, who immediately signed him to a recording contract. Now, a couple of years later, his first single has hit number 1 in Britain, in Australia, and here in the U.S. At number 35 this week on AT40, here's the man the British government subsidized, Rick Astley with "Never Gonna Give You Up."
American Top 40.
We're counting down the biggest hits in the land from number 40 to number 1, and here we are at number 2. This song's by a young man who started singing out of compassion for his audience. He's 22-year-old Englishman Rick Astley. You see, when he was 16, Rick lived in the small town of Newton-le-Willows, and he played keyboards in a local band. And he remembers, quote, "I wanted to save the audience from having to listen to our bass player sing. He was awful. I was new to singing, but I was better than him." End of quote. Here he is singing his second Top 40 hit, Rick Astley with "Together Forever."
American Top 40.
Shadoe Stevens on American Top 40. Next is the 22-year-old British singing star Rick Astley. Rick was discovered a few years ago singing in a small club in Lancashire by producer Peter Waterman. Waterman says he had a phenomenal voice. It was like hearing a 40-year-old black man while seeing this 19-year-old white pimply kid. Here's Rick at number 11 with "It Would Take a Strong, Strong Man."
My heart stops. CT40 with Kasem.
You're listening to us count 'em down on CT40. Now we're up to one of the hottest hits we've ever played. I mean, literally. You talk about a musician's nightmare, this is it. Here's the story. It was several months ago that Englishman Rick Astley was working in the studio, toiling away on songs for his second album. Because of the success of his first album, there was a lot of pressure on young Rick. He knew the follow-up had to be as good, if not better, than his debut. So Rick spent months writing all the songs. Then he spent weeks in the studio, carefully crafting each tune, changing the vocals and music until he felt he had a hit. Well, after he'd completed 6 songs, more than half the album, Rick was tired, and he decided he wanted to take a short break. So he went out of town. And while he was away, tragedy struck. The London studio he'd been working in, called The Warehouse, was gutted by fire. All of Rick's work was gone in a blaze of fire and smoke. He was devastated. But there was a ray of hope. Since he'd been recording on a digital system, there was a digital backup of parts of his tracks. It wasn't complete, and it wasn't good enough to use on the album, but at least it allowed him to reconstruct what he had done. And so, with grim resolve, Rick and his producer went back into the studio. They carefully redid the 6 destroyed songs, and then they finished the album. It was a painful, time-consuming experience, but it was worth the effort. The first hit off Rick's new album, called Hold Me in Your Arms, is one of the songs that was burned in that fire. It went to number 7 in our countdown, and this week dropped 6 notches on CT40 to number 13. Here's Rick Astley with a hot one, She Wants to Dance With Me.
American Top 40.
We're winding up this week's roundup of Billboard's biggest hits on American Top 40. I'm Shadoe Stevens in Buckaroos. Before we corral the top 10, let's say howdy to our first AT40 station in the Eastern European nation of Bulgaria. In Sofia, Bulgaria, it's Bulgarian National Radio. Dobra doshli. Ha-ha. Welcome, one and all. Let's head to number 1. When he decided to break from producer-writers Stock Aitken Waterman, Rick Astley had a lot of support, and some of it came from Elton John. They were here in L.A. at a dinner a while ago, and Elton told Rick, "Look, I think you're going to go on and do something really good now. If you want me to play piano, I will." Rick knows a great offer when he hears one, so he took him up on it. Elton played on 2 songs on Rick's album Free, Wonderful You and Behind the Smile. Rick says, "Obviously I was blown away by that because he could actually recognize the fact that maybe I might go on and do something different with some real quality to it. It gave me quite a bit of confidence." And that confidence paid off. This week, Rick is back in the top 10 with a song he co-wrote and co-produced. At number 9, here's Cry for Help.
She's taken my time, convinced me she's fine.